Welcome to the Leading Results Fitness Podcast, interviewing some of the best athletes in the world, discussing the training, diet and supplement principles of top coaches, educating you on all the things fitness and business. Sponsored by the UK's cheapest supplement supplier, My Gym Supps. Find all the top brands and lowest prices at www.mygymsupps.com. Also sponsored by the only female subscription site, Pro Female Fitness, where you can find some of the UK's best athletes discussing their diets and training with an interactive forum where you can ask any question and the athletes will get back to you. They have a library of over 300 videos to watch and learn. Now let's hand over to your host, Rob Whitfield, with this week's episode.
Hi, and thanks for joining us again today. Today I've got Rich from STROM. If you don't know who Rich is, I'm going to give him the platform now to explain a little bit about himself, where he's come from. But he is the owner of STROM, and I'll let him have the floor right now.
Sure, I appreciate that. My name is Richard Foster. Those of you who have heard of me will probably be bored of hearing this, but my name is Richard Foster. I'm from STROM Nutrition. I have competed in strongman at the national level, bodybuilding at an amateur level badly, powerlifting in a push and pull sense, and again at an amateur level. And STROM has been going in one form or another for around 13 years now. We primarily specialize in health-focused bodybuilding supplements now. Previously, we were a promotion company for strongman events, and we've done various different things, or I've done various different things over the last kind of 10 or 12 years. And thank you for having us on.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Rich. So, as I said before the podcast started, I sort of came around yourself about 3 or 4 years ago when you were doing supplement reviews before it got cool to do supplement reviews. So, obviously, that's how sort of I knew about you, and I saw you doing these supplement reviews and talking about the sort of scientific background between the ingredients in the panel and what they sort of look like. So, obviously, you are the owner of STROM. What took you to STROM, and what was your first product and why?
So, STROM, actually, a lot of people ask, because up until recently, people were still calling it STORM. STROM is a Norse word, an old Viking word. It means power. And it came about because I ran a strongman competition that was going to be filmed, and the filming company needed to invoice a company, not a person. And I also needed to have insurance, so I needed a business name, and that one kind of stuck. My ex-wife took the original STROM maybe 7 years ago, and we restarted 4 to 5 years ago in Shrewsbury, just as a normal supplement shop. So kind of run-of-the-mill supplement shop. We stocked a lot of Bodytronics, we did a lot of Pro Subs, and we used to bring a lot of American products in. I think it's fair to say, certainly back then, the Americans were ahead of us in terms of product development. One of the difficulties with that, though, is the reason they're often ahead of us is because they're not as heavily regulated. So about 4.5 years ago, Training Standards confiscated maybe £3,000 or £4,000 worth of stock from me. It was Blackstone Labs products, and at the time that was enough to nearly put us under. And what that kind of triggered for me in my head was, you know what, there's a demand for better products in the UK, but trying to build a business that's fundamentally based around bringing in products that aren't EU certified seems to, in the long run, it's not a very sensible long-term business plan. So can we formulate products that are as effective, but comply with all the EU regulations and laws? And the answer to that is kind of. In terms of health supplements and ergogenic aids, things like Support Max, things like Neuro, absolutely, we can do that better than the Americans. We've led the way in that department. In terms of stimulant, get you fucked up, fat burnery type things, we can't, because the only way to do that would be either to lie on the labels or to bring out products that aren't compliant. So we went very much down the health supplement type route. So we were the first company to do very much an efficacious all-in-one on-cycle support product in Support Max. And that showed us that we spoke to some people on forums and things initially, and people were kind of a little bit hazy about whether it was something that they felt that they would buy. At the time, I know I was trying to compete, and I was spending a huge amount of money buying lots of things separately, and it was very confusing. And the main issue we found was that amateur bodybuilders or low-level competitors, they simply didn't know what to use, or they would use things like Milk Thistle or Live 52. So we want to be able to turn around and say, look, if you're competing at a decent level and you're using anabolics, this is a product that will cover most of the bases for you. And if you want us to explain why, we can. But if you just, in the same way that some people do with cars and stuff, if you just want me to say, buy this, it will do the job, it kind of ticks most of the boxes unless someone's doing something really silly. And we found there was a real demand for that. So we very much focused on that side of the market. And we're very glad we have, because it's been very well received. The kind of on-cycle support cottage industry is huge now. There's loads of people doing lots of products, some of them very good, some of them less so. But at the time, I think that the key thing was that it simply hadn't been done, not to any kind of effective degree, other than kind of bullshit products. This was, I suppose, chronologically not that long ago, but in terms of the development of the market, it was a very different time.
Sure. So one of the things you said there is you said you didn't actually say this, but I'm reading between the lines here. So you would potentially see people lie on the labels of products, or sort of maybe misinterpret what they're putting in the product. Is that commonplace, or was it commonplace?
It's certainly less so than it was. Trading standards are very, very hot in the UK now. We've got a very good working relationship with our local ones, because when we had a load of product confiscated, we decided, it's probably better to be on these guys' side than not. It's very difficult to do in the UK. It's easier to do in America. In the UK, everything has to have certificates of analysis, and in the States, I understand that the process for that is less rigorous. I suppose the biggest problem that I foresaw at the time was that you would get people who look great and would say, this product is going to protect your liver, and they wouldn't lie about what was in it. What was on the label would be what was in it. It's just that what was on the label was shit. So I suppose it's not that they were lying in terms of the content of the product. They were lying in terms of overinflating the efficacy of ingredients that were never going to really, things like artichoke extract and Live 52, stuff like that. They're never, ever going to be effective products. But if people who are in a position of authority say it at the time, it could be passed off. I think now, if someone, I don't know, if Phil Heath brought out a product that was milk thistle and artichoke extract and vitamin C, regardless of the fact that he's an incredible bodybuilder, I think people now would have the knowledge, consumers have the knowledge now to call him out and say, well, that's bollocks. But at the time, that knowledge wasn't commonplace.
Yeah, sure. And you also said that you saw a lot of the time the American companies were actually almost producing better products than the UK companies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but now I think, if anything, the UK is actually leading the way in terms of quality over the US. Have you seen that sort of flip?
Massively so. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you the last time that I saw a proprietary blend from a UK manufacturer. It just doesn't happen anymore. People are very clear about what they're producing. They let their panels speak for themselves. Some American companies are still producing good products, but there's huge demand in America for British products. And it seems to be, in the same way that there's demand in the UK for American stimulants, speaking to American consumers, they don't trust American manufactured health supplements. And I suppose when it's Dante Trudell's talked about this with American manufactured astragalus supplements and saying, I bought them and used them, and they haven't done what they're supposed to do. And once that trust is gone, I suppose it's catastrophic.
Sure.
Certainly with bodybuilders, because you do blood work and you will see if something isn't what it says it is. Whereas perhaps in the general health sector, people are taking things more on merit, the life extension community, stuff like that. They may be taking things because they've been told they're good for them, rather than because they're looking at blood work and trying to resolve or improve issues.
So what then took you into the supplement industry to start with? I know you said you had a powerlifting background, a bodybuilding background. What took you into supplements specifically?
So my old training partner was a guy called Badger. Or is a guy called Badger. He's 3 times world's strongest man now. He's a world's strongest man competitor. And we used to live in a place called Bala, which has nothing in it. And I think we were 19 or 20, and I'd read in a magazine, and it was an advert for, I'm sure it was like anabolic creatine or something by USN, and it was probably creatine with some glucose or something like that. So we went to, and I was fat as fuck. We went to the nearest supplement shop, which was in a place called Wrexham. And we went in, and there was a guy, I swear to God, a guy in a leotard with a big moustache, and he was wearing like a lycra leotard over the top of shorts in his shop. And I went in and said, "Oh, I've heard about this product. I think it was USN, a USN anabolic creatine or something." He's like, "I don't sell fucking steroids." I was like, "No, I didn't ask about that. It's a creatine, an anabolic creatine product. I read about, and it sounded really good." And the guy was very, very aggressive, and he sold us a tub of ProMass by CNP, which absolutely wasn't. The last thing I needed was calories. Just a basic creatine monohydrate probably would have been fine. But that left me with a very bad taste in my mouth in terms of I felt like the guy had missold me a product. He'd not listened to what I said. And I was just generally a bit miffed. So I went away, a little bit academic by background, went away and kind of looked into products and built up a reasonable level of knowledge. And then Bala, where I lived, we had to travel an hour to get to the shop. That was the nearest supplement shop. I had like a maisonette. I had a flat with a shop underneath at the time. I just used the shop for storage for mountain bikes and kayaks and things. So we opened a little supplement shop in there. There's some pictures floating about it on the internet. It was tiny. It was like the size of a corner shop kind of thing. And we started to stock some Bodytronics products and just the basics, but there was a lot of rugby lads locally and things like that. And it kind of went from there, and it did okay for a small local shop. And then when I separated with my ex-wife, the business was in her name because I'm an idiot, which kind of put us back to square one. But that was kind of where it started, and that's where the obsession came from. And then I've been lucky enough. It's very much one of these industries where if you speak to the right people, you get in the right circles. I've been lucky enough to work alongside people who are very, very knowledgeable, to do consultancy work with massive companies. I do a little bit of work with Monster Energy. And getting an insight into how companies of that size scale their business is very eye-opening in terms of what we do.
Yeah.
And there's things that can carry over and there's things that can't. But from that little shop in North Wales, something fairly big has grown, and it's a combination of 50% like skill and work and acumen, 50% being very fortunate with the circle I've ended up in.
Sure. So business owner, shop owner, how do you go from business owner, shop owner to making your first product?
You get a credit card and you take a punt, basically. So the first ever product was Vascumax, the original Vascumax. There was only 250 tubs made of it, and there's a picture of my legs on it because I was massively egocentric and thought I was fucking jacked. I mean, I was okay, but I certainly wasn't as big as I thought I was. But I approached a manufacturer that I was friends with, and I said, "Look, I've got this idea for a stimulant-free pump product. Again, it wasn't something there was massive amounts of at the time. Could you manufacture it for me?" And you can now approach manufacturers and you can get small runs of product done. Again, at the time, it wasn't really a thing. I mean, you see adverts on Instagram now, like anyone, fucking Barry Jones can start a supplement company. But at the time, again, it was a lot more difficult. So I got a credit card. I paid for the first batch on that, and I kind of said, "Look, if it doesn't sell, then I'll use it myself." And unfortunately, it did sell. So we did Vascumax and Stimumax. The original Stimumax is now banned because it contained amp citrate, which I really, really liked. It was like a short-acting DMAA alternative. Used to suppress your appetite, but on prep, it was really good. Those were the first two products, and they did okay. They didn't set the world alight. We still sold mostly other people's products. And then I think I did one last big cycle with a goal to compete, which was probably around the time that I was doing the video of the ProSubs test booster. And I looked all right, other than having gyno, which I had to go to Poland and get chopped out last year. So I had this idea for a product, and we costed it up. And I mean, I'm sure you're aware of SupportMax OCS. As I say, when we brought it out, there was nothing else on the market. And now in the market room, people will say, "Oh, well, there's products with 800 milligrams of Tucker, there's products with this and there's products with that." And there are better products out there, but they're all at a higher price point. One of the key things with SupportMax, it had to be as effective as you possibly could be. And it probably took about 9 months of blood work on very willing friends to get it exactly right. It had to be as effective as you possibly could be while costing no more than the average kind of bottle of Trend Down South. Because if it cost too much, at the time, people were using nothing on cycle. If it cost too much, people just wouldn't buy it. Now, again, the market is very different now, but I stand by, if you want an all-in-one on-cycle support product, you'll struggle to beat the original SupportMax. However, I was aware that I was kind of nobody, but I was good friends with Dave Crossan. So I went to Dave and said, look, I've got this product. We've tested it on this person and this person and this person, different dosages, and this is kind of what we've arrived at as being really good. But I need someone who's got credibility to endorse it. And at the time, Dave had just done the Under Construction series. I don't know if you've seen that, which was pretty extreme, but it certainly meant he was at the forefront of people's minds. And Dave needed a few assurances. So he wanted to come to the manufacturer. He wanted to see all the certificates of analysis. He wanted to see a third-party analysis on the TUDCA. And he also requested, he requested two things. He requested the inclusion of citrus bergamot, which I'm ashamed to admit I wasn't overly aware of. And I mean, these are all commonplace things, but again, at the time, people using TUDCA and nacalcystine, none of it existed. Or it did exist, but no one used it. And then he wanted the TUDCA to be 500 milligrams. Now, 250 milligrams of TUDCA plus 1,000 milligrams of nacalcystine, we found to be very synergistic in the blood work that we've done. We're lucky enough to have a blood work project in store. 500 milligrams of TUDCA would have made it a better product, but it also would have made it uneconomical. It would have been more like £49, and I think we would have struggled to get people to buy it at that price, maybe even £54.95. That was the product that really took off for us. So we brought out Support Max. The first batch trickled out. And the first batch, I think we made about £1.40 a tub on, because we were making small batches. Shipping still cost me about £4.50 a tub. You got your VAT on there. Label it, there was almost no money in it, but people might buy a tub of Asky Max or a tub of Stigma Max while they buy it. So that's where you get your margin. The first couple of batches went very slowly. For about 3 months, it was kind of a bit of a lemon. And then people started posting their blood work. And that was the moment when it kind of took off. In fact, Luke Sandow and James Hollingshead, I think both of them posted their blood work from using Support Max, and they both saw dramatic improvement. And at the time, they were on much less restrictive contracts. I was friends with them both. I mean, I'm still friends with them both. It's just that they're very tied up with what they do with Redcon. They posted that, and the sales just went through the roof. I think we had maybe 300 or 400 orders overnight when Luke talked about it. And then Jamie Johal was using it, and Alf Bales. And at one point, every British IFBB pro was using it, I think, with the exception of Nathan Diasher. Male, that is. And that just kind of catapulted it, and everything's been a bit of a blur since then.
Yeah, sure. So, what would you? So a lot of people will put business down to luck, working hard. What would you like if you had to give a percentage? What would you say it was?
I mean, the last 18 months or so, I've been able to slow up a lot. Before that, I didn't have a holiday for 7, maybe 8 years. And I worked 7 days a week. When STROM started, I ran the shop. I had someone else help me out in the shop. I also worked for Sky full time. I used to do debt collecting in the evenings, and I used to coach. And I mean, people talk about no days off and stuff. I had maybe 18 months where I didn't have a day off, and I worked constantly. I maybe had 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. I couldn't do that now. It was just one of those things where the stars aligned. If I had launched Support Max 3 or 4 years before, I remember speaking to my dad about it, and my dad was insistent that if I talked openly about steroids, it would be the end of the business, because we had a lot of mainstream customers at the time. We were a supplement shop in town. We had runners and CrossFitters and all that. So my dad was really concerned that it would ruin us. If we'd waited 3 or 4 years, I'm not arrogant enough to think I'm some kind of super guru. I'm sure lots of other people would have had the same idea. We happened to do it first. We happened to do neuro. We did that kind of product first. But they were ideas that were already floating around. People were already talking about on-cycle management. People were talking about cortisol management. So I think we were very, very lucky with timing. I think you've got to put a shitload of work in. I don't think people realize it's not just working hard, it's working smart. People talk about, you can be the hardest worker in the room, but if what you're working at is fundamentally flawed, you're just wasting your time. I used to put a huge amount of time into forums, UK Muscle, and Facebook groups. And I think a lot of that was doing stuff that people maybe see as a waste of time, giving out information for free, giving out content for free, spending time in personal messages with people, trying to help them out. But that all built into where we ended up. Again, I don't know if I could repeat the same. Like, if I had to start from nothing now, I don't think the market is in a position where I could do it. because you can't just spontaneously innovate if things have already been done.
Yeah, sure. So one of the first things I also saw you guys do, Rich, was remove the proprietary blend sort of cap on the top of each product, and you guys were, if not pioneers, you were very close to the pioneer in the UK for doing that.
It's one of those things that never made sense.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're a consumer and you're buying something, you want to know what's in it.
Did you ever have any fear that when you did that, there would be a copying effect?
So I think it's fair to say there's not copies of products, but there are lots of products now that are very similar to ours from various brands. And people tend to stick with the people they like, the brand they. JP is the obvious answer. JP, I like to think I get on well with JP. JP does a lot of products that are similar to ours. Obviously, we did them first because we've been out for a longer period of time. There are people who will mentally associate with JP and JP's philosophy, which is, you know, super hardcore, progression at all costs. And they will probably prefer to buy JP's products. And there's people that might associate more with myself and my team's approach, which is not the class clowns, but, you know, we don't take ourselves so seriously. So I think there's an element of that. The biggest concern, I suppose, when you move to non-proprietary blends is that people will look at products like Support Max. People broke it down and said, well, you can't make that for that price, because they worked out how much it would cost for them to buy that much Tudka on Amazon or eBay, and that much. And you try and explain to it. Sometimes it's not worth arguing with people. You try and explain to people, yes, but I'm buying, you know, 100 kilos of that ingredient. I'm buying 50 kilos of that ingredient. I'm not buying a tub of 60 capsules. The economies of scale come into it to an extent. But that was when Support Max came out. That was one of the biggest arguments. We had people saying, "Oh, you couldn't afford to do it for that." You know, it costs me. I think at the time it was about £30 for a tub of Tudka, but that was a tub of 120 caps of 250 milligrams of Tudka. Well, Support Max actually only gives you 30 250 milligram servings. So that was the biggest problem we had with non-proprietary blends, is that people would. I've had someone turn around and go, "Well, why can't I just buy citrulline, beta-alanine, juglans, caffeine, and tyrosine and make my own Stimuax?" If you can be bothered to do that, you can. You know, in the same way that if you want to make your own mass gainer, you can. When I was younger and I was quite zealot, like I was one of the people who, I was much more of that hardcore mentality when I was younger, and I was very anti-mass gainers. But you know what? If you're busy and you want to buy a tub of stuff and you don't mind that it costs a little bit more per serving, I don't really have an issue with that anymore. I mean, we still don't do a mass gainer because it's not a product that I. But you get my point. Is
Yeah.
You pay your money, you take your choices. A lot of products you can make cheaper yourself if you buy all the raws on My Protein. Sometimes it's worth the Sometimes it's worth the effort. The majority of the time, it's not.
Sure. So we spoke about where the supplement industry was, what happened, where you went. Where do you see it going next?
The health supplement thing is ever growing. I do wonder where that will go long term, because we're getting awfully close to a lot of products now that make medical claims. Obviously, we know as bodybuilders that there are certain things that maybe GPs and so on don't deal with, and that people like Dr. Dean and people within the industry will understand more specifically. Having dealt with trading standards in the MRHA and stuff before, we have to be very wary of starting to tread on the toes of pharmaceuticals. And I know that's something that's already starting to be questioned at a higher level. The current trend seems to be one of more is better. And I don't believe that's necessarily the case. If you look at any category, but pump is easy because Vascumax is our pump product and it's underdosed if you look at the label. You know, if you were to watch a lot of supplement reviews, you'd look at the label and go, well, that's underdosed, that's underdosed, that's underdosed. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but they're not immediately apparent. And they're twofold. First of all, if you've got 3 ingredients that all do the same thing, do all of them need to be quote unquote clinically dosed? Now, in my opinion, possibly not, because synergistically they're all working towards the same goal. And in a study, each one has been shown, say, I know citrulline has been shown at a dose of between 6 and 10 grams to increase nitric oxide levels, which it has, absolutely. But if you've also got beetroot extract in there, and you've also got a nitrate in there, you've got other ingredients doing the same thing, they don't necessarily need to be clinically dosed. In the case of a pump product, the more nitric oxide, when your body converts citrulline into arginine and then arginine into nitric oxide, but when it converts citrulline into arginine, it also converts them into arginase. The function of arginase is to break down nitric oxide. So the higher you pump citrulline, the higher you pump arginase, the bigger pump you'll get, but then the quicker it will disappear and it will be harder to get it later in the game. There are ways of offsetting that, but it's not that more is worse. It's quite often that more simply doesn't offer value for money for the consumer. We're seeing a lot of products start to creep up in prices. I think when we first started doing pump-only products, the idea of a pump product that cost maybe £45 would have been ridiculous, but that's not that unusual now. And some of these products are amazing, but I think the consumer might start to question, well, all it does is give me a better pump, and it's £45. Does that offer me good value for money? I suppose it comes down to the person's circumstances and whether they can afford it or not. But I think we're likely to see more regulation, particularly around health-related products and stimulants. And there's very few stimulants left that we can use. And the downside of that, or the upside, depending on what you do and where you get your stuff from, I suppose, is that it will just go underground. So I suppose for the majority of bodybuilders, it's probably not a problem. Like if you can buy Debo, you can probably buy a stimulant tablet. But I think that's probably where it will go. Maybe not next year, but certainly in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. So I think one of the good points that you made is that people are becoming more educated on their supplements, but there is also a negative to that everyone also thinks they're an expert. So everyone now thinks that like they can look at a panel. Like the amount of times that I see somebody come in the gym and say, "Can I see the panel on this product?" and I'll give them the panel, and I don't mean to make them feel stupid, but I'll say, "What are you looking for?"
Yeah.
And a lot of the time they won't know, and they'll just it will almost be like I don't know how to put it. It's like then an awkward silence, and then they'll say, "Oh, is this any good?"
Well, there's different levels, isn't there? Sometimes people know what ingredients they're looking for, but they don't know the dosing. Or sometimes people will know the dosing of ingredients they look for, but not in fact. Some people are, as you say, very educated, but then there's also nuances that come into play. Not that as formulators we are privy to secret information, but there's certainly an awful lot of testing. I have made 5 different samples of Vascumax Black Edition. Vascumax Black Edition is still not on the market because I keep on writing formulas and go, that'll be fucking amazing. And then I try it and go, it's all right, but it doesn't do what you expect it to do. Now, I remember PJ Braun from Blackstone Labs, I used to love, not like, I wasn't obsessed with him, but I used to think that their kind of very flamboyant business approach was quite interesting. I used to love watching his content, and he talked about how they tried to make like a super premium product. The goal was to make a pre-workout that was like maybe $100 a tub, and you just put the best of everything in. He said every time they made it, the results were underwhelming. And that quite often happens. You put together something you think will be great, and it doesn't quite work out like that.
Absolutely. What I know you mentioned Blackstones. Obviously, Blackstones was Aaron Singerman and PJ. Obviously,
Yeah.
Aaron Singerman's gone off and done his own thing, and there seems to be like I'm not going to comment on a certain brand, but there seems to be the brand that Aaron runs that is almost trying to dominate the market now. Like they're almost trying to monopolize.
So the amount of money behind Redcon is phenomenal. They make decent-ish products. Like they're not making like boutique quality supplement needs, complete strength, trained by JP level stuff. But they're making better than average, which I think makes it easier for decent level bodybuilders to endorse them. But on the back end, they're very specific about how they protect their brand, is probably the best I can say, because I don't want to incur further wrath. I know I'm not super popular over there as it is.
No, sure. What I see as a consumer is that there's a massive drive. Like when I look at some of the US bodybuilders, because I still follow bodybuilding a lot, I still like bodybuilding a lot. Every top athlete sponsored by Redcon. Like, I mean, like 60, 70.
You think about the money that's involved in doing that, and then you think about, well, I mean, they gave away $10,000 or something the other month. That money has to come from somewhere, and where it has to come from is the margin in the product. Now, I realize, again, economies of scale, they're probably buying more raws than any of us, and they're probably selling more product than any of us. But that margin still has to be skimmed out of somewhere, and the consumer is ultimately paying for that. Just the same as they are with a brand like Monster, which I personally do a lot with. So I suppose I'd be hypocritical to say that it's wrong. That's just how certainly big corporate business works. But yeah, there's a huge amount of market power there, and I suppose if they go into a market sector, they say, right, well, we're going to own that.
Yeah, like I see them do. Like I watch the Redcon stuff quite a lot, because I do find it quite intriguing that when they came to the UK, they looked at, right, who is the most dominant bodybuilder? Probably Luke Sando. Let's sponsor Luke Sando. Who's the most dominant female? Probably Donna Murphy. Let's sponsor Donna Murphy. And they actually done the same when they went into Canada as well. They looked at people like Frank McGrath, who was, at the time, the Canadian best bodybuilder. Antoine Violetta. When they went into Canada, again, these are two bi-spoke bodybuilders coming from Canada who sort of run the roost almost, and they go in, sponsor those big athletes, and then almost try and dominate that market. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose on the smaller brands like myself, it is difficult for. So there's no point pretending that it's all sunshine and daisies and we fucking love them. On the flip side, they provide good content for consumers and bodybuilders and fans. They do. Their products are certainly better than the majority of mainstream. Like, if I had to use a mainstream brand, it would probably be Redcon. And they are pumping money back into the sport. I know they allow guys like Luke to be full-time bodybuilders. So I can't be too critical, but certainly as a smaller brand, it does make it difficult to compete on a marketing level. Well, we're never going to compete on a marketing level, but I heard someone on a podcast talk about us the other day, and they said that the British brands, I think they were talking about me and Supplement Needs, they put very little effort into their tubs. And for a moment, I was offended. But then they followed that with saying, because they just let the panel speak for themselves.
Yeah, probably the best way. Probably the best way.
It's the cheapest way.
Yeah, and I was going to say probably the best way in an economy that's becoming more educated.
Massively so. Yeah. People like C4 and stuff, No Explode, BSN, they can't do what they used to do. You can't just put a shiny label on the same old shit and people buy it.
Yeah.
So I mean, even Cellucor have had to up their game. I saw someone sent me their latest pre-workout the other day and said, "Oh, I bet this is shit." And I looked and went, "You know what? That looks okay."
Yeah.
So that can only be a good thing if the whole market is having to be elevated.
Sure. So I've got to be respectful of your time. We've had half an hour. I don't want to keep going on too long.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to finish with two questions that I've finished for everybody, and it's just a little bit of fun. So I need 3 people within the fitness industry. If you had your last dinner and you had 3 people to share it with, who would it be?
Fuck. Okay. Ben Chow. He's always fun. Talk about motorbikes. Dr. Dean. Oh, fucking hell. And Tariq, because I can watch Tariq from the supplement review and Dr. Dean argue while me and Ben talk about motorbikes.
Fair enough. And then finally, your 3 favorite films and why?
Aliens. Terminator 2. Because James Cameron. Because they are works of art. And Titanic, because I'm obviously a closet bender, and that film's amazing. I don't care.
You know what? That final film was actually very similar to what Josh said.
Wait, was that James Cameron as well?
Titanic.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not a film.
I think I've just revealed myself as a closet James Cameron fan, but that's okay.
And the reason that it was similar to Josh is because Josh also picked a film that was a little bit soft at the very end. Just
Josh is massively more soft than he appears, just all over.
Yeah.
I mean, we've sponsored Josh for about a year now, and I remember the first time I met him, maybe a year and a half, just being shocked at how lovely he is. because he looks terrifying.
Yeah. I've known him probably for like spoke to him 3 or 4 years just through bodybuilding and stuff like that. And it's he's always been a gentle giant. He's always been great.
Yeah, no, he's cool.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Rich, I just want to get to so if people do want to get a hold of you, do want to buy your products, do want to speak to you, how is the best way to go about it?
Probably the gram. I think it's strom_sports_nutrition or www.stromsports.com. If you want better customer service, though, feel free to go via any of our resellers. The 3 main ones being Cardiff Sports Nutrition, Supplement Needs, Insight Supplements. There's loads of other ones. Not that I'm bad at customer service, it's just that they're much better.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you ever so much for your time, Rich. I really, really appreciate it, buddy. As I say, really kind, really, really insightful as well. And I'm really glad that people will get something out of this.
Well, it's nice to speak to you, and enjoy your evening.
Brilliant. You too, buddy. Take care.
See you on the other side.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and make sure you subscribe. Until next time, check out all the athletes' updates on pro female fitness, and for all your supplement needs, head over to www.mygymsups.com.